My name is Abigail, and I'm 29. I was sitting in a crowded diner on my lunch break, the kind of place where the coffee's always burnt and plates clink like a bad soundtrack. Scrolling Reddit, I saw a post that stopped me cold. A woman wrote about her sister stealing her college fund, 35 grand her grandma left her. My stomach twisted not just from the greasy fries. I've lived that betrayal, and it cut deeper than she could know. Have you ever felt a story hit too close? If it resonates, hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. That Reddit post stayed with me like a splinter I couldn't pull out. 6 years ago, I was 22, standing in my childhood bedroom in Ohio, packing a suitcase with dreams bigger than the humid summer air. My acceptance letter from a small college in Michigan sat on my desk next to a photo of me and my grandma Dorothy. She'd left me 35 grand for school, her way of promising I'd go further than she ever could. I was folding my favorite sweater when I heard my parents' voices rise from the kitchen. Gail and Raymond never fought loud, so I crept to the stairs, curious. My mom's voice cracked, saying something about money. My dad muttered, "We had no choice." My stomach knotted. I thought it was about the electric bill or the old pickup breaking down again. I walked in expecting to ease their worry, maybe offer to pick up extra shifts at the diner. But their faces froze like I'd caught them stealing. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice smaller than I meant. My mom looked at the floor, twisting a dish towel. My dad cleared his throat, his eyes anywhere but on me. "Abigail, the college fund. It's gone." I laughed, a sharp, nervous sound, thinking it was a bad joke. But his silence pressed into me, heavy as the August heat. "Gone," I repeated. "How?" He sighed, rubbing his neck. "Sadie needed it. She was in deep with some bad debts. Gambling, mostly. We had to help her. Sadie, my older sister, 25, then always had a knack for trouble. But this, my fund, the money, Grandma Dorothy scrimped for her hands rough from years of sewing for neighbors. I gripped the counter, my knuckles white. "You gave her my future." My voice shook, but I didn't care. My mom stepped forward, her eyes pleading. "She was drowning, Abby. We couldn't let her sink. But you let me." The words slipped out sharp and raw. They didn't answer. The kitchen clock ticked each second louder than the last. I thought of Sadie, probably at some bar, laughing while I stood here, my dreams crumbling. I wanted to scream, to demand they fix it, but their guilty faces told me they wouldn't. I stumbled back to my room, the suitcase still open on my bed. My grandma's locket, a tiny silver thing she'd given me before she passed, sat on my nightstand. I picked it up, the metal cool against my palm, and traced the engraved flower on it. She'd believed in me, told me I'd be the first in our family to graduate college. Now what I sank onto the floor, the locket pressed to my chest, trying to breathe through the ache. I don't know how long I sat there before I grabbed my phone and dialed Reese, my best friend since middle school. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright. "Ready for college life, superstar?" I tried to speak, but a sob came instead. "It's gone, Reese. The money's gone." "What? How?" Her cheer vanished. "Sadie took it. They let her." She gasped, then went quiet, the kind of quiet that means someone's searching for words and finding none. "Oh, Abby, I'm so sorry. What are you gonna do?" I didn't know. I stared at the suitcase, the neatly folded clothes mocking me. "I can't go," I whispered. "I can't afford it now." Reese tried to comfort me, saying we'd figure something out, but her voice sounded far away. I hung up, feeling more alone than ever. Downstairs, I heard the front door creak. Harold, our neighbor, called out, dropping off a casserole. His cheerful, "How's the college girl?" hit like a slap. My mom's forced laugh in response made my skin crawl. I shut my door, blocking out the normalcy that didn't belong to me anymore. The locket was still in my hand, a reminder of what I'd lost. I wanted to believe my parents would make this right, that they'd see what they'd done. But deep down, a cold truth was settling in. They'd chosen Sadie over me, and I wasn't sure I could forgive them. The next morning, I woke up with a headache, my eyes swollen from crying. The locket was still clutched in my hand, its edges digging into my palm. I didn't want to face my parents, but I couldn't stay in my room forever. I dragged myself downstairs, the smell of burnt toast filling the house. My mom was at the stove scraping a pan while my dad sat at the table reading the paper like nothing had happened. Their normalcy felt like a betrayal all over again. I poured coffee, my hands shaky, and sat across from my dad. "So what now?" I asked, my voice low but steady. "You gave Sadie my money. What am I supposed to do?" My mom turned her face tight. "Abigail, we're figuring it out. You can still go to college. Maybe community college first, or you could work for a year." "Work for a year?" I set my mug down hard, the coffee sloshing. "Grandma left that money for me. For my degree. Not for Sadie's mistakes." My dad folded the paper, his jaw tight. "Sadie was in trouble, Abby. Real trouble. Those people she owed, they weren't messing around. We had to protect her." "Protect her," I leaned forward, my voice rising. "What about me? I did everything right. I studied, I got accepted, I had a plan. And you just handed my future to her." My mom stepped closer, her voice sharp. "Don't raise your voice. We're your parents and we made a choice. Sadie's family too." Her words hit like a slap. Family. As if I wasn't. I wanted to ask why Sadie's emergencies always came first, why my dreams were disposable. But my throat tightened, and I just stared at them, their faces blurring through tears I refused to let fall. I stood my chair, scraping the floor, and went to the living room. My old high school yearbook was on the shelf, and I flipped through it, desperate for something to ground me. Photos of me and Sadie at homecoming, her arm around me, smiling like she cared. We used to share secrets, sneak cookies from the jar, laugh until we couldn't breathe. When did she stop being my sister? The phone rang, and my dad answered. I heard him murmur, "Yeah, she's upset, but she'll come around." My blood boiled. Was he talking to Sadie? Telling her I'd just get over it? I stormed back to the kitchen, ready to demand answers, but he'd hung up. "Who was that?" I asked. "Just Curtis," he said, avoiding my eyes. "My Uncle Curtis, always quick to smooth things over. He's worried about you." Worried about me? I laughed, bitter. Maybe he should worry about Sadie since everyone else does. My mom sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. "Abigail, you're strong. You'll bounce back. Sadie, she's not like you, not like me." The words echoed, twisting something deep inside. I wasn't strong, not then. I was breaking, and they couldn't see it. I grabbed my keys and left the screen door slamming behind me. The summer air was thick, pressing against my chest as I walked to my car. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't stay in that house. I ended up at the park where Grandma Dorothy used to take us. The swings were empty, creaking in the breeze. I sat on one, my feet dragging in the dirt, and tried to make sense of it all. I thought about calling Reese again, but she'd already heard the worst. Instead, I pulled out my phone and Googled community college tuition. The numbers stared back at me, thousands I didn't have even with my diner job. I could apply for loans, but the idea of starting my future in debt, all because of Sadie, made my stomach churn. A jogger passed by, her ponytail bouncing, and I envied her carefree stride. My life was supposed to be like that, moving forward, not stuck in this mess. I remembered my dad bailing Sadie out before speeding tickets, a shoplifting charge, when she was 19. Why did they always save her? Why was I the one who had to be strong? When I got home, the house was quiet. My parents were gone, probably at the hardware store or visiting Curtis. On the counter was a note. "Dinner's in the fridge. We love you." I crumpled it, my hands trembling. Love wasn't enough, not when they'd shattered my trust. I went to my room and pulled out my suitcase again, unpacking it this time. Each shirt I folded felt like giving up. I wasn't going to Michigan. I wasn't going anywhere. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The neighbor's dog barked, a sound I'd always found comforting, but now it just grated. I kept replaying my mom's words. "Sadie's not like you." What did that even mean? That I could handle the fallout? That my pain didn't matter? The injustice of it burned, and I knew this was only the beginning. If they could justify this, What else would they excuse? I closed my eyes, the weight of their choice settling into my bones, and wondered how I'd ever move forward. Weeks passed, and I was drowning in double shifts at the grocery store, my hands smelling of bleach from cleaning shelves. I'd enrolled in a few community college classes, but the cost ate my savings, and I was barely sleeping. The house felt like a minefield. My parents tiptoed around me, their forced smiles worse than silence. I kept waiting for them to say something real to fight for me like they did for Sadie, but they didn't. It was like I'd become invisible. One evening I came home bone-tired, my sneakers squeaking on the kitchen floor. My mom was setting the table, the clink of plates too loud in the quiet. My dad was in his recliner flipping channels. "We're having dinner tonight," my mom said, her voice too bright. "Sadie's coming." My stomach dropped. "Sadie." I set my bag down hard. "Why?" "She's family," my mom said like it was obvious. "We need to move forward." Move forward? I wanted to laugh, but my throat was tight. I hadn't seen Sadie since she took my future, and now they wanted me to sit across from her past the mashed potatoes and pretend it was fine. I went to my room, slamming the door, and paced, my heart racing. I thought about leaving, but where would I go? This was still my home, even if it didn't feel like it. By the time Sadie arrived, I'd pulled myself together, or so I thought. She walked in, her hair dyed a new shade of blonde, her laugh loud as she hugged my dad. She barely glanced at me like I was furniture. We sat down, the table cramped with her presence. My mom served chicken, the smell turning my stomach. Sadie talked about her new job at a bar like everything was normal. I gripped my fork, my knuckles white. Finally, I couldn't take it. "So Sadie," I said, my voice cutting through her chatter, "you ever think about paying me back?" The room went still. My mom froze a serving spoon in her hand. Sadie's smile faltered, but she leaned back, crossing her arms. "Pay you back for what?" "For the 35 grand you stole," I said, my voice steady but burning. "Grandma's money. My college fund." She rolled her eyes like I was a kid throwing a tantrum. "God." "Abby, get over it." I was in a bad spot. "You're fine. You're working right." "Fine." I leaned forward, my chair creaking. "I'm killing myself to afford 2 classes while you're what? Buying new hair dye." "You didn't even say sorry." My dad cleared his throat. "Abigail, that's enough. We're not doing this." Not doing what? I turned to him, my voice rising. "Talking about how you let her ruin my life. How you're still acting like she's the victim." My mom slammed the spoon down. "Stop it, Abigail. You're being selfish. Sadie needed help. You're strong enough to handle this." "Selfish." The word hit like a punch. I stared at her, my eyes stinging. "I'm selfish for wanting what was mine, for wanting you to care." Sadie smirked, sipping her water. "You always were dramatic." I wanted to flip the table, to scream until they understood. Instead, I stood my chair, scraping the floor, and walked out. The front porch was cool, the crickets loud in the dusk. I sat on the steps, my breath shaky, trying to hold it together. Inside, I heard their voices low and murmuring, probably saying I'd come around. They always thought I would. At work the next day, I was a mess, dropping a jar of pickles in the aisle. My coworker Mallory noticed, her brow furrowed. "You okay, Abby?" she asked, helping me clean the glass. I hesitated, then told her everything, the words spilling out. She listened, her eyes soft. "My dad always favored my brother," she said. "I get it. It's like you're not even there." Her words were a lifeline, but they didn't erase the ache. I kept thinking about Sadie's smirk, my mom's accusation. Selfish, was I? For wanting fairness, for wanting them to see me. The anger was growing sharp and unfamiliar, and I didn't know how to stop it. I left work early, my head pounding, and drove to the old library where I used to study. The smell of dusty books usually calmed me, but today it felt suffocating. I sat at a corner table, staring at my community college textbook, the words blurring. Mallory's story about her brother kept circling in my mind, mixing with Sadie's smirk and my mom's voice calling me selfish. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was unraveling like a sweater snagged on a nail. My phone buzzed. A text from Seth, my boyfriend. You okay? You've been off. I wanted to tell him everything, but he'd already said I should just leave home like it was that simple. I typed fine and shoved the phone in my pocket. I couldn't handle his practicality right now. I needed someone to understand the ache the way it felt to be erased by my own family. When I got home, the house was dark, but I heard voices in the backyard. I peered through the window and saw my parents sitting with Sadie's string lights casting soft glows on their faces. They were laughing, passing a bowl of popcorn. My chest tightened. Hours after our fight, they were cozy with her like I hadn't just bared my soul. I watched Sadie toss her head back carefree, and my dad pat her shoulder. That gesture, so small, broke something in me. He hadn't touched me like that in weeks. I slipped inside, avoiding them, and found a stack of mail on the counter. Bills mostly. But one envelope caught my eye, a bank statement addressed to my parents. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did, my hands trembling. There were transfers to Sadie's account, hundreds of dollars dated after they'd given her my fund. They were still funneling money to her while I was skipping meals to afford textbooks. The numbers stared back at me, proof of their choice, and I felt like I was choking. I hid the statement under a magazine when I heard the back door open. My mom came in humming, then stopped when she saw me. "You're home," she said like it was a surprise. "Why didn't you join us?" I swallowed the urge to scream. "Didn't feel like it," I said, my voice flat. "Looks like you're all good without me." Her face softened, but not in the way I wanted. "Abby, don't be like that. We're trying to keep things normal." "Normal?" I stepped closer, my voice low but shaking. "You're giving her money again, aren't you?" After everything, her eyes widened, then narrowed. "You went through our mail. I saw the statement. Mom, you're paying her rent while I'm killing myself to stay in school. How is that fair?" She crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "You don't understand. Sadie's trying to get back on her feet. You're doing fine. You're always fine. Fine." That word again. I wanted to grab her shoulders, make her see me, but I just stood there, my hands clenched. "I'm not fine," I whispered. "I'm breaking and you don't care." She opened her mouth, then closed it, turning away to rinse a glass. The dismissal hurt more than her words. I went to my room, locking the door, and pulled out an old photo album from under my bed. Pictures of me and Sadie at the county fair sharing cotton candy, her braiding my hair. I traced her smile, wondering when she'd stopped caring. When they all had. The next day, I overheard a cashier at work, Loretta, whispering to a customer about that girl causing trouble with her family. My cheeks burned. This town was too small, and now I was the villain, the dramatic one who couldn't let things go. I kept my head down, scanning groceries, but the shame clung to me. At break, I called Uncle Curtis, hoping he'd listen, but he sighed. "Abby family's messy. You gotta forgive and move on." Forgive. I hung up my hands, shaking. They all wanted me to swallow my pain to make it easy for them. That night I drove aimlessly, the radio off, the hum of the engine my only company. I ended up at the edge of town near the river where Sadie and I used to skip stones. I got out, the cold biting my skin, and screamed into the dark, my voice swallowed by the water. It didn't help. Nothing did. They'd chosen her again and again, and I was running out of ways to pretend it didn't destroy me. 2 years later, I was 24, living in a shoebox apartment with peeling paint, working retail by day and taking night classes. I'd cut contact with Sadie, but my parents still called, their voices cautious, like they were handling glass. I kept them at arm's length, answering just enough to avoid guilt. My life was a grind, but I was making it work, piecing together a future they'd tried to take. Then one rainy afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mom, her tone urgent. "Abby, we need to talk. Can you come over?" I hesitated, my gut warning me, but curiosity won. I drove to their house, the wipers slapping against the windshield. The familiar street felt foreign now, the oak tree by their mailbox heavier with age. Inside, the living room smelled of stale coffee and my dad's aftershave. They sat on the couch, my mom wringing her hands, my dad staring at his shoes. The air was thick like before a storm. "What's this about?" I asked, standing by the door, my coat still on. My mom glanced at my dad, then spoke, her voice low. "Sadie's starting a business. A boutique downtown. She needs a loan and we thought, maybe you could co-sign. I froze my breath, catching. Co-sign for Sadie. The words felt like they belonged to someone else's life. You're asking me to back her up after she stole my college fund? My dad shifted, finally meeting my eyes. Abby, it's a good opportunity for her. She's turned a corner. We just need a little help to get her started. A little help, my voice cracked louder than I meant. You gave her 35 grand of my money, and now you want me to risk my credit for her. Are you serious? My mom's face hardened. You've always been too proud, Abigail. Holding grudges doesn't help anyone. She's your sister. Proud. The words sliced through me, reopening every wound. I stepped forward, my hands trembling. Proud I'm scraping by working 60-hour weeks taking loans for school because you chose her over me. And now this. My dad stood, his voice firm. We didn't choose her. We did what we had to. You were always the strong one. We knew you'd figure it out. Figure it out. The room spun, their faces blurring. You knew I'd figure it out, I repeated, my voice rising. You took my future because you thought I could handle it. Do you know what that cost me? My mom reached out, but I stepped back. Abby, please. We're family. We need to stick together. Family. I laughed sharp and hollow. Family doesn't do this. You didn't just give her my money. You're still propping her up, and I'm the one paying for it. The argument escalated, words flying like sparks. My mom accused me of being cold. My dad said I was making it harder than it needed to be. I wanted to scream that they were the ones who'd broken us, but my chest was too tight. Then my dad said something that stopped me cold. We used your fund because we believed in you, Abby. Sadie needed saving. You didn't. Believed in me. The words were a knife twisting deep. They hadn't saved me because they thought I didn't need it, but they'd left me to drown in my own way. I stared at them, the people who'd raised me, and saw strangers. Every hope I'd clung to, that they'd apologize, that they'd see my pain, shattered. I turned to leave my hand on the doorknob when my mom called out, Abby, wait. There's something else. Her voice was different, strained. I looked back and she hesitated, her eyes darting to my dad. The house, we're behind on payments. The bank's talking foreclosure. Foreclosure. The word hit like a punch. Their house, the one I'd grown up in, where I'd learned to ride a bike, where Grandma Dorothy had taught me to knead dough, was slipping away. And they were telling me now, after asking me to bail out Sadie again. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So you're losing everything, I said, my voice barely a whisper, and you still want me to save her. They didn't answer. The silence was louder than any argument. I walked out the rain, soaking my hair, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break. I got in my car, gripping the wheel, and sat there, the world closing in. They'd never change. They'd always choose her. And I was done waiting for them to see me. I drove away, the rain hammering my windshield, my hands shaking on the wheel. My parents' words echoed, they believed in me, so they let me fall. The betrayal wasn't just the money anymore, it was the truth that I'd never been their priority. I pulled into my apartment complex, the neon sign buzzing in the dark, and sat in the car, too raw to move. My phone lit up with a voicemail from Nina, my classmate. Her voice was soft, worried. Abby, call me. I heard something. I didn't want to know, but I called her back, my voice hoarse. What's going on? She hesitated. I was at the coffee shop and some people were talking. They said your parents are telling everyone you're refusing to help Sadie, that you're turning your back on family. They're making it sound like you're the problem. My breath caught a sharp pain in my chest. They're what I whispered. It's all over town, she said. I didn't want to tell you, but you deserve to know. I hung up, my hands numb. The town I'd grown up in, where I'd sold Girl Scout cookies and waved at neighbors, was now whispering my name like I was some cold-hearted traitor. I pictured my mom at the grocery store, my dad at the barber shop, spinning a story where Sadie was the victim and I was the villain. The humiliation burned hotter than the anger, and I felt exposed, like my pain was a spectacle. I stumbled into my apartment, the dim light casting shadows on the walls. My textbooks were stacked on the table next to a half-eaten sandwich from yesterday. I sank onto the couch, my mind racing. How could they do this? After everything, they were dragging my name through the mud to protect Sadie's image. I wanted to call them to scream that they were liars, but what was the point? They'd never admit it. I grabbed my laptop, desperate for distraction, and checked my email. There was a message from my professor about a missed assignment, another reminder of how I was barely holding it together. But then I saw a notification from the county website, a public notice I'd subscribed to for a class project. I clicked it, not thinking, and froze. It was a foreclosure listing for my parents' address dated 2 days ago. The house was set for auction in a month. They hadn't just mentioned it in passing. It was real, public, undeniable. I scrolled through the details, my heart pounding. The mortgage hadn't been paid in months, the debt piling up while they funneled money to Sadie's boutique. I imagined strangers bidding on the house, walking through the rooms where I'd built forts with blankets where my grandma's laughter used to fill the air. And my parents, so quick to ask me to co-sign for Sadie, hadn't even hinted at how bad it was. They'd let me stand in their living room begging for fairness while their world was collapsing. I walked to the window, the rain streaking the glass. My reflection stared back, hollow-eyed, a stranger to myself. I thought of every sacrifice I'd made, every night I'd stayed up studying, every dollar I'd saved. For what? To be the strong one, the one who figured it out while they painted me as the selfish daughter who abandoned them. The injustice was a weight crushing me. And for the first time I felt something snap. Not anger, not anymore. It was resignation, a bone-deep certainty that they'd never see me, never choose me. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall, and clutched my knees. The apartment was silent except for the drip of a leaky faucet. I'd spent years hoping for an apology, a moment where they'd look at me and say, "We were wrong." But that moment wasn't coming. The foreclosure notice, the town's gossip, their blind loyalty to Sadie, it was all proof. I was alone, and the family I'd loved was gone. Not because I'd left, but because they'd pushed me out. The truth was a wound, raw and bleeding, and I didn't know how to stop it. 3 years later, I was 27, sitting at a desk in a small accounting firm, my first real job after scraping through night school. The sting of my parents' betrayal had dulled to a quiet ache, but the foreclosure notice I'd seen online still haunted me. I hadn't spoken to them in months, their calls unanswered, their texts unread. My life was mine now, built from scratch. But that house, the one I'd grown up in, felt like a loose thread I couldn't cut. One morning I was balancing spreadsheets when an email pinged, another county auction update. I almost deleted it, but my finger hovered, then clicked. There it was, my parents' address, the auction date set for next week. My heart raced, a mix of dread and something sharper like a spark. I leaned back in my chair, the office hum fading. The house was slipping away, and with it every memory of my grandma's voice, her hands guiding mine to plant tulips in the yard. I spent my lunch break researching my sandwich untouched. Foreclosure auctions were brutal, cash heavy, no guarantees, but the starting bid was low, a fraction of the house's value. I did the math, my savings plus a small loan I could qualify for might be enough. The idea hit me hard, not just to bid, but to win. To take back the house they'd let crumble while they propped up Sadie. It wasn't revenge, not exactly. It was reclaiming something they'd tried to erase. I called Diane, my mentor at work, who'd been like a second mom since I started. Her voice was warm, steady. "You're thinking of buying it?" she asked after I explained. "I don't know," I admitted, pacing the parking lot. "It's crazy, right? But it's my home. Grandma wanted me to have a future, and they took that. Maybe this is my way of taking it back." She was quiet, then said, "It's not crazy if it's what you need. Just be sure you're doing it for you, not them." Her words stuck with me. That night I sat on my couch, a budgeting app open on my laptop. I'd been frugal, saving every extra dollar, but this would wipe me out. I thought of my grandma's locket tucked in my jewelry box and the promise she'd made, a life I could build. The house wasn't just walls. It was her laughter, her faith in me. I couldn't let it go to some investor flipping it for profit. The next day I went to the bank, my palms sweaty as I sat across from a loan officer named Joyce. She reviewed my application, her glasses slipping down her nose. "You're young for this," she said, not unkindly. "It's a risk." "You sure?" "I'm sure," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. I showed her my savings, my pay stubs, proof I'd clawed my way to stability. She nodded, and by the end, I had pre-approval for a loan just big enough to make it work. I spent the weekend preparing reading auction rules, watching YouTube videos of bidding strategies. My apartment was a mess of sticky notes and coffee mugs, but I felt alive, like I was finally moving toward something. Nina came over bringing pizza, her eyes wide as I explained my plan. "You're really doing this?" she asked, half awed, half worried. "I have to," I said, slicing a pepperoni. "If I don't, I'll always wonder." She hugged me, her voice soft. "You're stronger than you know, Abby." Her words lit something in me, a quiet fire. I wasn't the girl who'd sat on her bedroom floor, crushed by their choices. I'd built a life, and now I was choosing to fight for a piece of it. The auction was days away, and I could feel the weight of it, the risk, the possibility. I pulled out my grandma's photo, her smile steadying me, and whispered, "This is for us." I wasn't sure what I'd do if I won, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was holding the reins. The morning of the auction, I woke before dawn, my stomach churning. I dressed carefully, choosing a navy blazer that made me feel steady, like I belonged in that room. In my pocket, I slipped my grandma's photo, its edges worn from years of holding. The drive to the county courthouse was quiet, the radio off, my thoughts loud. I wasn't just bidding on a house. I was staking a claim on the life I'd been denied. The weight of it thrilled and terrified me. The auction room was sterile, all fluorescent lights and folding chairs filled with strangers in suits and a few locals I vaguely recognized. I took a seat near the back, my hands clasped tight to stop their trembling. A man in a loud tie. Quentin eyed me as he sat nearby, his smirk, saying he thought I was out of my depth. I ignored him, focusing on the auctioneer's gavel, each bang like a pulse in my chest. When my parents' address came up, the room shifted, a murmur rippling through. The starting bid was low, just as I'd hoped, but my throat tightened as I raised my paddle. Quentin bid against me, his voice sharp, driving the price up. Others joined in, and I felt the room closing in, their voices blurring into a hum. I kept bidding, my voice steady, though my heart raced. Each number I called out was a defiance, a refusal to let this slip away. Quentin leaned over, his breath sour. "You sure you got the cash for this, kid?" His tone was all condescension. But I met his eyes, unflinching. "I'm sure," I said, and raised my paddle again. The crowd hushed, sensing the tension. My savings, my loan, everything I'd scraped together was on the line. But I thought of Grandma Dorothy, her hands kneading dough, telling me I could be anything. This was for her, for me. The bids climbed, and I matched them, my resolve hardening. Quentin faltered, his smirk fading as the numbers pushed past his limit. One by one, the others dropped out, their paddles still. The auctioneer called my final bid, his voice echoing. Going once, going twice. I held my breath, the room spinning. Sold. The gavel fell, and a rush hit me like air after holding my breath too long. I'd done it. The house was mine. A few people glanced my way, some curious, some annoyed, but I didn't care. I clutched the photo in my pocket, my fingers tracing its outline, and felt a surge of pride so fierce it brought tears to my eyes. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky a pale gray. I walked to my car, my steps lighter but my mind racing. I hadn't told my parents or Sadie, and I wouldn't, not yet. This wasn't about them. It was about taking back what was mine. Not just the house, but my sense of worth. I thought of Diane's advice, do it for you. I was. I stopped at a diner on the way home, the same one where I'd read that Reddit post years ago. I ordered coffee, the waitress's smile kind but distant. As I sipped, I pulled out my phone and texted Nina. I got it. She replied instantly, a string of exclamation points that made me laugh, the sound foreign after so long. I didn't tell Reese or anyone else. This victory was private, a quiet reclaiming of my ground. Sitting there, I realized how far I'd come. The girl who'd cried on her bedroom floor, who'd screamed by the river, was still in me, but she wasn't driving anymore. I'd built something stronger, not out of anger, but out of choice. I paid for my coffee, leaving a generous tip, and stepped outside. The street was empty, the world still waking. I looked at the keys in my hand, the ones that would soon open my new front door, and slipped them into my pocket. My fingers brushed Grandma's photo, and I nodded, a silent promise kept. Months after the auction, I was 27, standing in the kitchen of the house I'd bought my house now. The walls still held echoes of my childhood, but I'd added my own touches, a new coat of paint, a thrift store table, a vase of wildflowers. I was unpacking boxes, the floor creaking under my feet, when a knock came at the door. My stomach tightened. I hadn't told my parents or Sadie I'd won the bid, but I'd known this moment was coming. I opened the door, and there they were, my mom, her face pinched, my dad, his eyes hard. Behind them, Sadie stood, arms crossed, her new blonde streaks glinting in the sunlight. The air was heavy, the kind of quiet that presses against your skin. "Abigail," my mom said, her voice sharp, "we need to talk." I stepped aside, letting them in my heart, steady but loud. They walked into the living room, their eyes darting over the changes I'd made. My dad stopped by the fireplace where I'd hung a mirror and cleared his throat. "You bought our house," he said, not a question. "How could you?" I leaned against the counter, my hands gripping the edge. "It was going to auction. I bid. I won. It's mine now." Sadie snorted, stepping forward. "Yours? This is our family's house, Abby. You can't just steal it out from under us." "Steal?" I met her eyes, my voice calm but edged. "I paid for it, Sadie. With money I earned. Unlike you, I didn't take what wasn't mine." My mom's face reddened. "That's unfair. We were struggling. You knew we were behind on payments. You could have helped us, but you swooped in like some vulture." Her words stung, but I held my ground. "Help you after you gave Sadie my college fund? After you asked me to co-sign her loan, I did what I had to do." My dad shook his head, his voice low. "This was our home, Abby. Where you grew up. How can you live here knowing we're in a rental scraping by?" The guilt they wanted me to feel flickered, but I pushed it down. "You made choices," I said. "You chose Sadie again and again. I chose myself." Sadie laughed bitter. "You're so high and mighty now. What's next? You gonna kick us out of town too?" I didn't answer, my jaw tight. Their anger was a storm, but I'd weathered worse. My mom stepped closer, her eyes wet but hard. "We raised you, Abigail. We gave you everything. And this is how you repay us, by taking our home." Her words were a blade cutting deep. I wanted to shout that they'd taken more from me, that their everything came with strings. But I stayed silent, letting their accusations fill the room. My dad paced his boots heavy on the floor. "We're not done," he said. "We're talking to a lawyer. This isn't right. A lawyer." The threat landed, but it didn't shake me. I'd done everything by the book, checked every detail with Felix, the attorney Diane had recommended. "You can try," I said, my voice even, "but the deed's in my name. It's legal." Sadie's eyes narrowed. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Acting like you're better than us. You'll regret this." I looked at her, really looked, and saw the sister I'd once idolized. The one who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd snuck me her Halloween candy. She was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as an obstacle. "I don't regret it," I said, and meant it. My mom's voice broke the silence, softer now, almost pleading. "Abby, we're family. You can't just cut us out. What would your grandma think?" The mention of Grandma Dorothy was a low blow, and it took everything not to flinch. I thought of her garden, the tulips we'd planted, the way she'd believed in me. "Grandma would want me to stand up for myself," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "That's what I'm doing." They stared at me, a mix of shock and fury in their eyes. The room felt smaller, the air thick with unspoken words. My dad turned toward the door, his shoulders slumped. "This isn't over," he muttered. Sadie followed, tossing a glare over her shoulder. My mom lingered, her lips parting like she wanted to say more, but then she left too, the door clicking shut behind them. I stood there, the silence deafening, my hands still gripping the counter. Their words hung in the air, heavy with blame, But I felt something else too, a clarity cold and sharp. I'd expected their anger, but not the way it made me feel so alone, like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The house, my victory, suddenly felt too big, its walls closing in. I stayed rooted in the kitchen after they left, my fingers still curled around the counter's edge. The house was too quiet, the kind of stillness that amplifies every creak, every thought. I walked to the window, watching their car disappear down the street, taillights fading into the dusk. Part of me wanted to run after them, to explain, to make them see. But I didn't move. I'd spent years chasing their approval, and I was done. The next day I went to work, my eyes heavy from a sleepless night. The office was a blur of keyboards and coffee mugs, but I felt eyes on me. Trent, a coworker who loved gossip, leaned over his cubicle. "Heard you bought your folks' house?" he said loud enough for others to glance up. "That true?" His grin was all teeth, like he'd caught me in a scandal. I forced a nod, my voice flat. "Yeah, it's true." I turned back to my screen, but the whispers followed a low hum that made my skin prickle. By lunch, the story had spread, twisted into something uglier. I'd schemed to take the house, left my family homeless. I ate alone in the break room, the sandwich dry in my mouth, wondering how my parents' version had reached the office so fast. When I got home, a note was taped to my door, handwritten, no signature. "Shame on you." I stared at it, the words blurring. I crumpled it, my hands shaking, and went inside, locking the bolt with a click that felt final. The town was turning on me, just as Nina had warned, and I hadn't seen it coming. I thought I'd prepared for their anger, but not this public judgment, this weight of being the outcast in a place I'd once called home. I called Loretta, my neighbor, who'd always been kind. Her voice was warm but guarded. "Abby, people are talking," she said. "They're saying you kicked your parents out for revenge. I don't believe it, but it's rough out there." I thanked her, my throat tight, and hung up. I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing. In the attic, I found a box of old toys, mine and Sadie's tangled together like our lives used to be. A plastic doll with one eye stared up at me, and I remembered us playing house, promising we'd always be best friends. I shut the box, my chest aching, and carried it to the garage. Some things didn't belong here anymore. The days blurred, each one heavier. At the grocery store, a cashier I'd known since high school avoided my eyes, ringing up my bread in silence. At church, where I'd gone hoping for peace, a woman I'd once called Auntie turned away when I smiled. The isolation was a slow bleed, and I felt it in every glance, every hushed conversation that stopped when I walked by. I offered my parents a deal against my better judgment. I called my voice steady and said they could rent the house if they respected my boundaries. My mom answered, her tone icy. "Rent from you, our own daughter. You've gone too far, Abigail." She hung up before I could respond, and the dial tone was a wall I couldn't climb. I sat on the porch that night, a blanket around my shoulders, the stars sharp in the sky. The neighborhood was quiet, porch lights glowing, but I felt like a stranger. I'd won the house, but at what cost? The victory I'd felt at the auction was slipping, replaced by a hollow ache. I'd stood up for myself, but I hadn't expected to lose so much. Not just my family, but the town, the sense of belonging I'd taken for granted. I pulled the blanket tighter, my breath visible in the cold, and stared into the dark, wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. A year later, I was 28, and the house had become my own. The walls were a soft blue now, the floors polished, a row of potted herbs lining the windowsill. I'd settled into a rhythm, waking early to the sound of birds, my days split between work and quiet evenings with a book. The town's whispers had faded, not gone, but softer, like a radio turned low. I'd learned to live with them, to let their judgment pass through me like a breeze. One Saturday, I decided to throw a small housewarming, my first real gathering since moving in. I invited Nina, Diane, and a few others from work, keeping it simple. A tray of sandwiches, a pitcher of iced tea, fairy lights strung across the backyard. The air was warm, thick with the scent of blooming lilacs. As I set out plates, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years, like I was finally claiming this space, not just surviving in it. Nina arrived first, her arms full of a homemade peach pie. "This place is you," she said. grinning as she looked around. "It's like you've always been here." Her words warmed me, a reminder of how far I'd come. Diane came next, her hug firm, her eyes crinkling with pride. "You've made a home, Abby," she said, and I nodded, my throat tight. As the others trickled in, laughter filled the yard, mingling with the hum of cicadas. I watched from the porch, a glass of tea in my hand, feeling a quiet joy. These people, my chosen family, saw me for who I was, not the story the town told. Miles, a new guy from work, raised a toast, his voice earnest. "To Abby, who built something real." I smiled, the words settling deep, and clinked my glass against his. Later, I slipped inside to grab more napkins and found myself in the hallway staring at a photo I'd hung me at 10 gap-toothed, holding a daisy from Grandma's garden. I traced the frame, remembering her voice, firm but kind, telling me I was enough. I hadn't realized how much I'd needed that memory, how it anchored me now. The hurt from my parents, from Sadie, was still there, but it didn't own me anymore. Back outside, the party was winding down the sky, bruising purple. Nina pulled me aside, her eyes soft. "You seem different," she said. "Lighter." "What changed?" I thought about it, leaning against the porch rail. "I stopped waiting," I said, "for them to fix it to see me. I'm building my own life now." She nodded, squeezing my hand. "You're doing it, Abby, and it's beautiful." After everyone left, I cleaned up the house quiet again. I stepped into the backyard, the grass cool under my bare feet, and looked at the stars. I'd started gardening a small plot where I'd planted lavender and daisies, a nod to Grandma's love of growing things. Kneeling by the soil, I pressed my hands into the earth, feeling its steadiness. It was a small act, but it grounded me, a promise to keep growing too. I thought about a letter I'd found in my mailbox that week, my mom's handwriting on the envelope. It was short, an apology that felt more like a formality than a reckoning. "We miss you," she'd written, but there was no mention of Sadie, no real accountability. I'd read it once, then tucked it in a drawer. I wasn't ready to respond, maybe never would be. For now, I needed this peace, this space to breathe. I stood brushing dirt from my hands and looked at the house, its windows glowing softly. It wasn't just a building. It was proof I could rebuild, that I could choose myself. The night was still, the world holding its breath, and I felt a calm settle over me, like a tide pulling back, leaving the shore clean. The days after the housewarming felt softer, like the world had turned down its volume. I was still waking early, still tending my garden, but there was a new rhythm to it, a steadiness I hadn't noticed before. I'd started taking online classes again, working toward a degree I'd once thought was lost. The laptop glowed on my kitchen table, each night my notes scattered like a map of where I was going. It wasn't the college dream I'd had at 22, but it was mine, and that was enough. One afternoon, I drove to the local nursery, the air crisp with fall. I wanted a rosebush for the garden, something to honor Grandma Dorothy's love of beauty. The woman at the counter, an older lady named Ruth, helped me pick one with tight pink buds. "This'll bloom strong," she said, her hands weathered like Grandma's. I smiled, feeling a connection I couldn't name, and carried the bush home, its roots wrapped in burlap. I spent the evening planting it, the soil cool against my fingers. As I worked, I thought about Sadie, something I hadn't done in months. I'd heard from Jocelyn, my cousin, that she'd moved to a city an hour away, chasing another scheme that would probably fail. The news didn't sting like it used to. It was just a fact, like the weather. I patted the earth around the rosebush, naming it Dorothy in my mind, and felt a release, like letting go of a breath I'd held too long. At work, I was finding my place. Miles, the new guy, had become a friend, his quiet humor a balm after long days. One lunch break, he told me about his own path, dropping out of college to care for his mom, then going back years later. "You don't have to rush," he said, peeling an orange. "You just keep going." His words stayed with me, a reminder that my journey didn't need to look like anyone else's. I started running in the mornings, a habit I'd never had before. The streets were empty. The sky streaked with dawn, and my breath came steady, matching my strides. Each step felt like a choice, a way to carry myself forward. I'd passed the old park where Grandma used to push me on the swings, and instead of pain, I felt gratitude. She'd given me more than money. She'd given me roots, the kind that held firm no matter what. One evening I found a box of old letters in the closet, ones I'd written as a kid, to imaginary pen pals. I sat on the floor reading them, my young voice spilling out hopes for adventure, promises to be brave. I laughed soft at how much I'd wanted to see the world. I wasn't that girl anymore, but I wasn't so far from her either. I tucked the letters back, keeping one out to read again later, a tether to who I'd been. I thought about my parents, their silence since our last call. The letter from my mom still sat in the drawer unanswered. I didn't hate them, not anymore. I just didn't need them to define me. I'd spent so long wanting their love to be fair, to be enough, but I'd found something better, my own. It wasn't loud or showy. It was in the way I watered my plants, the way I studied late, the way I let myself rest. As I locked up for the night, I paused at the front door, my hand on the knob. The house was warm, the hum of the fridge a quiet companion. I stepped outside, the air cool, and looked at the rose bush, its silhouette faint in the moonlight. I didn't need to prove anything anymore, not to them, not to the town. I was here standing on my own ground, and that was enough. I closed my eyes, the night wrapping around me, and breathed. I'm 29 now, sitting in my home office, a small room I've filled with books and a creaky desk I found at a flea market. The morning light slants through the window, catching a glass of water I left out last night. It's been a year since I settled into this house, since I stopped looking over my shoulder for my family's shadows. My life is quiet, not perfect, but mine, and that feels like a gift I didn't know I could have. I've finished my degree, a slow climb of late nights and dog-eared textbooks. Last month I walked across a stage in a borrowed cap and gown, Diane cheering loud enough to make me blush. I'm a senior accountant now, guiding younger colleagues through spreadsheets, watching their eyes light up when numbers click. It's not the dream I had at 22, but it's real and I'm proud of it. I keep a small frame on my desk, a photo of me holding my diploma, my smile wide and unguarded. Mornings are my favorite. I wake to the smell of coffee brewing the machine, a splurge I justified after a bonus. I take my mug to the front porch where I've set up a rocking chair and watch the neighborhood stir. Kids bike down the street, their laughter sharp and bright. I wave to Loretta across the way, her garden bursting with color. She's become a friend, someone who asks how I'm doing and means it. These small connections, they've woven a net around me, catching me when I falter. I've started painting, a hobby I picked up on a whim. The dining room is my studio canvases, leaning against the walls, splattered with blues and greens. I'm not good, not yet, but there's something about the brush in my hand, the way colors blend and shift. It's a way to say what words can't, to make sense of the mess inside. One painting, a messy swirl of dusk over a field, hangs above the couch. Nina says it's beautiful. I think it's honest. I haven't spoken to my parents or Sadie in over a year. Their absence is a ache, dull but present, like a bruise you forget until you press it. I heard from Jocelyn that Sadie's latest venture crashed, some online store that never took off. My parents are still in their rental, getting by, or so she says. I don't ask for more. I've stopped needing their story to make sense of mine. That letter from my mom, the one I never answered, is still in the drawer. I might read it again someday, but not now. I've been seeing Reese again, tentative steps toward rebuilding. We met for coffee last week, her wedding ring catching the light as she stirred her latte. She apologized for drifting, for not knowing how to help back then. I told her it was okay, and I meant it. We talked about her toddler, my job, the way life twists in ways you don't expect. It wasn't like old times, but it was something new, a bridge we're both willing to cross. I walk to the mailbox most evenings, a ritual that feels like checking in with the world. The street is lined with maples, their leaves turning gold as fall creeps in. I pass a dog walker, a man named Carl, who always tips his hat, and we exchange nods. These moments, they ground me, remind me I'm part of something bigger than my pain. The mailbox is usually empty, just bills or junk, but I open it anyway, liking the sound of the hinge. Today I'm here in this house, this life I've built. It's not loud or grand, but it's solid like the oak table I sanded down last spring. I've learned to love the ordinary, the clink of my spoon against a cereal bowl, the way sunlight pools on the floor. I'm not running from the past anymore, not chasing what I lost. I'm just living day by day, and it's enough. I set my coffee down, the mug warm in my hands, and let the morning settle around me soft and still. Sometimes I stand in the backyard where the rose bush I named Dorothy is starting to bloom its petals a soft pink against the green. I water it carefully, watching the soil darken and think about how much has changed. I used to believe family was a promise, a safety net that would always hold. But I learned it's not the blood you share that defines you, it's the choices you make, the ones you keep making even when they hurt. I chose myself, and it's the hardest, best thing I've ever done. I've started keeping a journal, a spiral notebook I fill with thoughts I can't say out loud. Late at night when the house is quiet, I write about the girl I was, the one who waited for apologies that never came. I don't hate her for hoping, but I'm glad she's grown. I write about the days I feel strong, the days I don't, and the truth that both are okay. Life isn't about being unbreakable. It's about rebuilding piece by piece until you recognize the shape of your own heart. I saw a post online the other day, not unlike the one that started this story. A woman wrote about losing something precious stolen by someone she trusted. I read her words, felt the echo of my own pain, and realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Sadie, not at my parents. The hurt is still there, a scar I'll always carry, but it doesn't lead me. I've forgiven them not because they deserve it, but because I deserve to be free. That's what I wish I could tell that girl on Reddit. You can't control what they take, but you can decide what you keep. I think about Grandma Dorothy often, her quiet strength, the way she'd hum while washing dishes. She didn't leave me just a college fund. She left me a belief that I could start over no matter what. I carry that now in the way I sign my name on work emails, in the way I laugh with Nina over dinner, in the way I let myself rest without guilt. I've built a home not just in this house but in myself, and it's a place where I'm enough. The world keeps turning and I'm part of it, not fighting it anymore. I walk my neighborhood at dusk, the air cool, the streetlights flickering on. I nod to Carl, who's walking his dog, and smile at a kid chasing a firefly. These moments, small as they are, remind me I belong not to a past I can't change, but to a present I've shaped. I'm not defined by what I lost, but by what I've chosen to build. What's a moment you chose yourself, even when it was hard? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. It's those shared truths that connect us. If my journey resonated with you, please hit like, subscribe, or share this with someone who might need it. It means the world to know you're listening. Thank you for being here, for walking this path with me. Here's to building our own homes wherever we are.